The Collective Whisper Podcast with Simon Kane.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Collective Whisper Podcast. I am your host, Simon Kay, and we're glad to have you along on board. We hope you're enjoying the guests so far. We love interesting people. We love talking to them. So hopefully there's somebody for you. This week, I'm going to talk to Eleanor Shanley. Eleanor Shanley is one of Ireland's most loved and respected vocalists. In her long and rich career, we have enjoyed Eleanor's many solo performances and recordings, in addition to her body of work from her wonderful collaborative projects, both recordings and live performances. A beautiful career in itself with DeDannan marked Eleanor's baptism to her professional career, her fondly remembered period working with good friend and Irish icon Ronnie Drew, Mike Hanrahan, and her work with Donal Lunny. Garradice and longtime friend and leading classical guitarist John Feely are just a few names from many. Across her collective projects, Eleanor Shanley has truly spread her wings and enjoyed mixing up the sounds within the folk and traditional music genres. And on her most recent album, Canción, amor, with John Feely, we also get to enjoy some beautiful classical arrangements. Renowned for her unique interpretation of Irish and root songs, Eleanor has been at the top of her profession since joining DeDannan, and in addition to a number of collaborative projects since. Eleanor has recorded many solo albums, including Desert Heart, A Place of My Own, and 2015's Forever Young, from which her single, the Tom Moore classic Gorgeous and Bright, was the most played track on RTÉ Radio 1 in the same summer. Eleanor has worked alongside many other great musicians through the years and also recorded with the Dubliners, Sharon Shannon, Donal Lunny, U2, and too many more, both at home and internationally, to mention here. Her time working with Ronnie Drew was a very special time in her life, and this is a friendship she treasured. They recorded 2 albums together, A Couple More Years and El Amor de Mi Vida, which was recorded shortly before Ronnie died. Eleanor and Ronnie performed live together on many occasions also. Welcome to the show, Eleanor Shanley. So, Eleanor Shanley, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very good, Simon. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. It's great to have Irish artists on the show. I'm a musician and a music lover at heart, so I try to get all kinds of artists from across the whole spectrum of music, whether it be pop, rock, metal, you name it, we'll have them on the show.
That's healthy.
Because I think everybody has something to give, and you've given a lot to Irish music over the last few years.
And I've been at it a long time, so hopefully I've given something. I'm 34 years in the business now.
Wow. Yeah, they don't really give out gold watches or anything for that length of time in the music business. But I mean, there are accolades and stuff, but you kind of have to work hard nonetheless, don't you?
You do have to work hard. But, you know, I worked in an office for many years and nobody ever kind of applauded when I finished the day's work. But, you know, when you're in this business, you finish your concert, everybody gives you a round of applause. So that's accolade enough for me.
For you, do you feel that the music business has changed a lot now?
Oh, jeepers, yes, it has. I mean, when I started with DeDannan all those years ago, the first album I made was on vinyl. There were no CDs at that stage. And you know, very few people were actually making albums. So in a way, it was a lot easier. But now everything has changed because people are making albums in their front room. You know, everybody's making a CD or whatever it is now, and it's all online. So in one way, it's more difficult because you have all that competition out there, if you want to call it, for want of a better word. And in another way, it's great because it's giving a voice to people who would never have been heard back in the day. You know, people who can really perform but would never have the wherewithal to make an album or record. So it's good.
I think in some ways, technology is good in lots of ways. But in other ways, then you have this thing where if everybody's doing it, it dilutes the waters a little bit, you know. So it's not to say that these people aren't talented. The point is that one time you had to show your talent, prove it, work hard, do the shows, and then get your spot. But nowadays, sometimes the hardworking musicians can put in all the time and then see somebody else make it who, as you said, is in their front room and hasn't put in the work, but maybe is discovered.
Absolutely. And that's all these reality shows, competitions, you know, people who become a star overnight.
Yeah, I always think that's hard to take for musicians because what happens is, you know, you put in years and years of work and let's say you see these talent shows, and for a lot of people, they say, oh, they say to musicians, would you go on that talent show or would you do this? And they're like saying, no, I wouldn't do that kind of thing. So the point is that it's hard. It's hard to know which avenue to go down all the time, you know. And I think for a lot of people, they want to be successful, but they're not willing to take those avenues.
Yes, exactly. And you have to work hard. But I think the truth will out in the end. I think the longevity will come to people who really are working, and rather than being an one hit wonder kind of thing and disappearing because you haven't put the work in. And that's why I'm happy, really happy that 33 years later I'm still working, and I have no intention of giving it up in the near future.
Let's go back a little. You're from County Leitrim, and we had another, Leitrim person on, Charlie McGettigan, on this show 2 seasons ago. And tell us about growing up in Leitrim.
Well, I was born in a tiny little village called Keshcarrigan, and at that time it had only a population of 19 people.
Okay.
And now there's a few hundred in it, I think, because of all the building and boom and all of that. A lovely little village where everybody knew everybody. And in my family, my mother and her sisters and her brother were all beautiful singers. Never played instruments. It was always singing. So there'd be parties in the various houses, Christmas and whatever. And whether you could sing or not, you'd have to sing. And we'd all have to have our little party piece ready. And my aunts and uncle used to teach me songs, and that's where it kind of all started. And it's a beautiful part of the country because it's all kind of lakes and rivers, and hills, lovely Schleveneer and Shemore, the famous O'Carolan piece. That's where I'm kind of half a mile down the road from where that was written.
Okay, wow, that's nice, steeped in history.
Carolan spent some time in Leitrim, yeah.
When did you were probably started singing before you started playing instruments, I imagine. And when did you kind of say, I want to have the guitar to accompany me? When did that kind of come into play?
I think when I was about 12.
Okay.
And I can still remember throwing tantrums. I wanted a guitar because, I wanted to sing. But my father, anyway, went into Garradice and Carrick-on-Shannon, shop that's still there. And he arrived home with this guitar in a kind of a cardboard box, the shape of,
Oh, yeah, like they look sometimes like coffins.
Exactly. Oh, I can still remember the smell of the guitar coming out of that. I was so happy.
Yeah.
But it was the worst guitar on the planet because the strings were like way up from the frets. Yeah, it was really.
Yeah, the action was really high and everything in it.
Oh, God. And my fingers were all covered in blisters for years. And it was bad in a way because when I was trying to learn it, then I used to lose interest in it because my fingers were so sore. But then years later, bought a guitar myself, and that's it. I'm not a great player. I wouldn't kind of.
I think you're pretty proficient. I've seen your videos and everything. Your nice melodies on the guitar, and the important thing I think with music and being a musician and playing instruments, sometimes it's a vehicle for the voice, or you'll get some people that are more technical, but then maybe they don't have the voice, so sometimes people, they have both, but then sometimes people only have one, and one they might say, oh, I play the guitar, but it's just to accompany myself. I leave it to other people. So it's a great instrument in that way, isn't it?
Exactly. I'd be one of these who plays the guitar just to accompany myself, but I would certainly rely on the really good guitar players then to accompany me on stage and indeed for recording.
Tell me then, so as a teenager growing up, did you have other hobbies and things, sports or anything that you were into, or was art, or was it always music?
Art was a big thing for me, and it was certainly art and English would have been my best subjects in school. And I did art for kind of some time, but then when I left school, I left behind and didn't paint for a long time until I came to Ballinasloe.
Okay.
And I joined an art group, and then I did an online course in abstract art through lockdown, and I'm still doing it. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So the art is taking as much time now as my music.
Right. And do you find one kind of, I don't want to say challenges the other, but gives inspiration to the other?
One definitely gives inspiration to the other. Yeah. And even in my approach to it, I find that art makes me focus more on my music as well. For some reason, it's kind of motivates me to do things.
When you're in the middle of, let's say, an art session, do you kind of get ideas for music and inspiration? Has it opened a new channel, shall I say, for music?
In a way, I think it has, because you can be doing the same musical thing for a long time, and it's good to have that something else in the creative mind to focus on too, and one helps the other along at the moment anyway.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and they're kind of deeply intertwined sometimes. Different arts. We can look at
Yeah.
poetry and look at song and say, okay, they're
Yes.
very heavily connected. And you can some famous poems, Raglan Road, have been turned into beautiful songs. But sometimes with art as well, there's great inspiration, and whether it be the art of a movie or a play or a picture or a painting that have inspired people to write something because maybe they see something in it and then it makes them think, okay, there's a story there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And just when you mentioned play, drama was a big thing for me as well when I was growing up. And I spent years studying in Betty Ann Norton's School of Speech and Drama in Dublin when I moved to Dublin first.
Okay.
So, yeah,
So all round you had that artistic flair, but it's knowing which path to choose, isn't it?
I think it's more the path chose me because DeDannan found me singing kind of in a session in the corner of the Merchant Pub, and that then just took me over, and I went off in that direction. I was happy to follow.
How old were you then when that happened?
Oh gosh, I was in my 20s at that stage.
Okay. And tell us the lead up to that. So you were singing in sessions and just playing with different people in different places. And what, did Dannon walked in, or it was a special event, or what was it?
I used to sing at sessions in the Merchant Pub on the Quays here in Dublin, and Ned O'Shea and Frank, oh, his name is gone, heard me singing, and Dolores had just left DeDannan at the time, and they knew DeDannan were looking for a singer. So Frank Cooney was his name actually, and they've both passed on. But Frank, I remember he met me and he had one of those cassette recorders, and he recorded me singing a song on the cassette recorder, and then he sent it down to Alec Finn and Frankie Gavin of DeDannan. And a couple of weeks later, I went down and met them in Galway. And 2 weeks later, I was off to Finland, Sweden, and Wales with them.
Wow.
It was that sudden.
And you said you used to work in an office. So at that time, you were working in an office.
Yeah, oh, big change because I was working in what was Foss and Bagot Street, ANCO. It was at that time. And I came back and just, I knew I was going. That was it. So gave up the permanent pensionable job to head off.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think, musicians at their core sometimes would give up everything for the dream or everything for that life and for it to be successful. But then other people who only, want that stability and don't want to take chances, maybe don't have that artistic side to it. So it's a hard choice sometimes, isn't it?
It is a hard choice. And I think for some people as well, I mean, if you have family, if you have children, I hadn't children at that time and still don't have children. So in a way, it was easier for me to choose to go and kind of live, because you're not getting a wage at the end of the week. That's one thing. Like when I was in the permanent job, you always knew you had your wage coming in at the end of the week. This is so much more. You wouldn't need to be going into the music business for money.
So when you went off and you were doing that tour, okay, and you were, like you said, Sweden, Finland, Wales, so that was like a big culture shock to you, no?
Oh, absolutely. Totally. In every way. Because the holidays would have been just going to like Ibiza or something for a week or,
Sun holidays.
So, yeah, exactly. This kind of travel was completely different. And definitely, I'd say for at least the first year, I was a tourist more than a singer because I was just loving all this traveling around, kind of seeing different places.
Did you have to change your style for,
Musically?
Yes.
Well, I was always a fan of DeDannan, so I would have sung songs like Sweet Forget Me Not and Nadine and songs like that in those days. So not really. And I brought my own songs to it then, kind of like the one you mentioned there, Raglan Road and songs like that, It's very much my style because my mother and like her, as I said, her sister, that it would have been traditional songs they would be handing down anyway. So
yeah,
it would be folk and traditional I was doing. I love country music as well.
That time when you were like attempting to leave, did you have some people saying to you, oh, go for it, and other people maybe saying, oh, geez, don't give up the job? I'm sure you had people on both sides of the fence, no?
Do you know something? Not one person said to me, don't do it, including my family, including my parents.
Really?
They were completely on side and they knew that's what I wanted to do.
Okay, that's good.
And I suppose also the DeDannan were at a good kind of level in the music business at that time. So it was everyone, even people I worked with in ANCO, like the Director General at the time, Jerry Kelly, said, if you don't take this opportunity, you're madder than I ever thought you were.
And ANCO, that when you just mentioned an ANCO there, I do explain it to people sometimes because when I was like 15, I did a carpentry apprenticeship and I had to go to ANCO. and I was doing like, and now it's FOSS obviously, but that time it was ANCO, and it was when people obviously weren't academic or they had an interest in trades and stuff. It was the thing, and there was hairdressers and there was everything. So it's a different type of creativity that was going on in there.
Absolutely.
I'm sure, yeah, it's when you were working in that kind of environment too, chances didn't come up like that for people sometimes in those areas, no?
Not at all. I mean, I was totally, I didn't know anyone in the music business. I really didn't. I didn't. So to kind of try and get there, I wouldn't have a clue where to go, how to start, anything like that. And the only thing you used to go to the odd sessions. So it was fate. It really was fate.
Was it something then as well that when you left and you were also going working with people that you hadn't known before, so they were all kind of strangers, was that a bit daunting?
It was because you're just like going off for a few weeks with total strangers. I'd only met them maybe once or twice before I went away with them, and I didn't know. But actually, I settled in very quickly, and I like people, and I've always liked meeting new people anyway. So that part was easy enough. But for quite a while, I was the only girl in the band as well. But then Caroline Lavelle, the cellist, she was in the band for some time with me, and that was great. It was nice to have her.
Okay, okay. So when you went on tour then, that lifestyle, was it like hotels and B&Bs and all of this and playing in different towns?
Hotels and playing in different towns and going to the States and, traveling like at 4 o'clock in the morning from gig to gig in the States and in the snow and all that kind of thing. And in those days, I still thought
Wow.
that was glamorous. I don't think it's that glamorous now, I have to say. So it's,
But it's exciting. It was exciting, wasn't it?
yes, it's exciting. And I was young and just thrilled to be seeing new places and meeting all these people. It was great.
And how did your, like your craft or singing, because the thing about it is when anybody takes over from somebody else, and especially with Dolores Keane and everything, it's quite difficult because you're thinking to yourself, will I emulate their singing? Will I do my own singing? Will I have a mixture of both? And that's quite a difficult, isn't it?
It is, but I very much did my own thing, and the lads in the band, that's what they wanted as well. And sometimes in a band like that, when you go abroad, people don't really know who the singers. They couldn't name the singers or musicians in certain places, so they don't really know if they've changed singer or not. They know the band by a name. But that was kind of comforting in a way because I didn't. Well, I'm a huge fan of Dolores Keane's to this day, so I wouldn't even think of trying to emulate her or do the songs that Dolores did.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's such a distinctive way so I wanted to just be myself and do my own thing.
Yeah, and it's hard, isn't it? Because you have to just go in and be yourself, and you have to kind of hope that what you're doing is, good enough for what they want. And it's quite hard, isn't it? It's quite hard to take over. And I've had some people obviously have been connected on the show. We had, for example, Ruth Dillon, who used to sing. She sings with the Rains now, but she used to sing with Dolores and everything.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think it's hard, but if you make your own stamp on it and you can kind of show that you're the one for the job, you can, you can really change people's opinions too, can't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And people, they accept you. They accepted me at that time. So I was lucky. And I just stayed 5 years with DeDannan, and then I wanted to go and really do my own thing. So I started off then my own journey.
And then from there, so to speak, were you thinking, what do I do? Where's my next move? What's my choices here? Or did you need a break from it?
No, I wanted to do a solo album, and that's exactly what I went out to do.
And was that daunting itself in its own way?
I was lucky because I had a deal with Warner's, so financially I was fine. I did 2 albums with them, so
Right.
that kind of took the pressure off. But again, I was young, I was kind of really interested and excited about the whole journey, so it seemed a natural thing to do, a natural progression just to do my own album. So I don't think, no, I never found it daunting, or it was just natural.
Let's say a lot of the songs you sing are from a kind of across different styles. So you have, folk, country, roots, different things. So when you were doing your own stuff then, was it hard to make those choices of what would be on the album?
Yeah, and it still is.
It still is.
Because there's so much different styles of music that I love. I mean, I did the whole gospel album as well, and I love singing with gospel singers. So what I do is just do songs I really want to do and hope for the best. Because otherwise, I'm kind of, if I'm deliberately doing something to go in a certain direction, I'd feel that I'm not being true to myself and not being true to the audience. So for me, it's important to do songs I love, whatever genre they come from. And I tend to fall into the folk and traditional category anyway, with the odd country song thrown in.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing about Irish folk. People sometimes say, well, Irish country is different to American country. You have different levels of like how singers are. Some Irish country singers are more like American singers. But then you have some artists who kind of go between folk and country and they have a different style, don't they?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I probably would lean certainly more towards American country.
Right.
As I love Emmylou Harris. And then in the folk, I love Joan Baez, Leonard Cohen, all that kind of stuff, always have done. So
Who would be, I mean, when you were growing up, and you first kind of started listening to music, who were your main inspirations and influences?
definitely when I started buying my own music and all of that, it would have been Joan Baez for sure. And Emmylou, the ones I've mentioned. Edith Piaf, I've always loved.
Okay.
I like the kind of women singers, kind of strong women singers. Delia Murphy,
Yeah.
Mayo, County Mayo. And then Leonard Cohen. I would have loved Leonard Cohen. The Dubliners. I love the Dubliners. And I was thrilled then when I ended up singing with Ronnie.
Yeah. That was kind of like
Absolutely.
a childhood dream then. I mean, because sometimes they say never meet your idols, but in that case, it worked out.
Oh, it worked out. He was fabulous. He really was. He was just, I loved working with him. And I miss him to this day.
Yeah, I mean, he was such a big influence on Irish society and Irish music, wasn't he? And I think what it was, he's a big loss now. And like we look back in those times, with Luke Kelly when he was here. And I think Ronnie Drew was the same kind of loss, wasn't he, to Irish music?
Absolutely. And in Ronnie, everybody knew him.
Yes.
Everybody. You couldn't walk down the street with Ronnie. Be hello, Ronnie. Hello, Ronnie. Hello, Ronnie. It was kind of
Yeah, I say it was difficult, wasn't it?
yeah, because he was a distinctive look and his voice, everything about him. But he was great.
When you were doing your solo stuff and you, as you said, you never imagined one day you'd sing with Ronnie Drew, but how did that kind of connection come about then? Like, did you sing together and you just had a chemistry together or what?
What happened was the Dubliners were doing their 30 years of Graham album, and I was with DeDannan at the time. And again, it was luck and fate because they invited DeDannan to be part of the 30 years of Graham album, and I was the singer.
Okay.
So I did Boots of Spanish Leather with Ronnie and Will the Circle Be Unbroken?
Oh yeah, that's a great song.
Great song. Yeah, great song. And then a couple of years later, I had left DeDannan after that, and myself and Ronnie were invited to Finland to do a festival. And there was a reception in the Finnish embassy in Dublin for this festival. I can't even remember what the festival was, but we met up again at the festival and we started chatting. And Mike Hanrahan was there at the time as well. We started chatting and we said, why don't we try doing some work together? And then we became great friends, both myself, Ronnie and Mike, and I still work with Mike.
As you were working with Ronnie through the years then, and maybe his health was deteriorating, was that different then over the years, I imagine?
It was. And it was sad in the end, but he was very brave, and he was like we were with him till like in the week he was dying. He still, all he wanted to do was go down and have a cigar. He wanted to have a cigar. The very thing that killed him, really.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's like, it's when the smoker sometimes they say, well, look, it's done this to me now, but I want to enjoy it because I always enjoyed it, isn't it? It might have, I always remember that story when George Best got the liver transplant, and the first thing when he got out of hospital, he wanted to go to the pub because they kind of have this idea, okay, you can't change that about me. You can change the internal parts or fix me up, but you're not going to change that about me.
Yes, yeah, and that must have been the way it was with Ronnie. Yeah, it was too late to change at that time, but
too late, yeah.
And even singing with Ronnie creatively, I loved the creative side of it because he was very professional. We'd rehearse everything over and over and over and over again, even stage moves, because he loved acting. He wanted to be an actor.
Yeah.
More than a singer.
He'd want to go over everything thoroughly.
Absolutely. And even the walk on, walk off stage,
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that something, had you seen that with other performers or that were kind of like theatre like? No.
No, absolutely not. Not Nothing like that. That was just kind of go on, do your concert, take your bow, go off. Everything with Ronnie was the introductions to the songs we rehearsed. We had scripted them, we rehearsed them, everything like that. So there was, and he made it look kind of natural, you know.
When you start working with somebody like that and they have their own kind of way of doing stuff, and you bring songs to the table and you have them in your own keys and stuff, did you find then when you're with this kind of artist, you're like, okay, I better do everything to kind of please them? And was that kind of difficult, or did you kind of find your own ground where you stood your ground?
We utterly both respected each other and respected each other's, because we had, our keys were so different.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Like he was one end and I'm the other end. But again, that was the thing we worked on together to either harmonize or, you know, move around the keys, but was out of total respect for each other. So that it was never an issue. It was fun actually.
Yeah, because it's a big difference in your ranges, and I mean sometimes with the lower voices and the higher voices, you can get great harmonies and everything, but it's you have to work on it, don't you, as well?
100%, yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's a lovely thing. It's a lovely thing.
It took a lot, and Ronnie was very open to ideas and new music. You know, we were doing songs by the Eels and things like that, and he wouldn't bat an eyelid at doing things like that. He just,
He had that openness with his singing and everything.
yeah, and a sense of adventure in his music.
Yes, yes. Tell us, you've recorded with so many artists, Sharon Shannon, Eddie Reader, Tommy Fleming. And so, a song I know that, is you do wonderfully. And I think you might sing it for us, the Galway to Graceland and everything. Tell us about like working with some of those artists and then them rubbing off on you in your own performances.
Well, I've always loved collaborating, and I still do. I really love it because, again, I find it creatively really interesting. And working with people like Sharon, and Sharon and I are great friends, you know. It's great, and we've great fun apart from anything else, kind of doing stuff together. Eddie Reader, of course, wonderful. That was on my Eleanor Shanley and Friends album, and which Colin Hind, I don't know if you knew him, he used to run the Celtic Connection Festival in Glasgow. And I remember we were good pals, and I rang him, was telling us doing an album called Eleanor Shanley and Friends, and he says, "Oh, that'll be a solo effort then." There was, they had loads of people. Actually, the other one that whose song I loved on that album was Ray Lynham.
Oh, Ray Lynham, yeah.
Yeah, we did All Fall Down together.
I get that sense from you that, as you said, you love working with people like that. So once I suppose you stepped into the DeDannan and you started working with people, you got a great joy from it. And that was to continue through the years, the collaborations, no?
Yes, to this day. At the moment, I'm working with John Feely, the classical guitar player.
Yes, great guitar player.
Oh, he's wonderful. And again, that's an interesting thing because kind of the folk and traditional with the classical side is quite a revelation for me as well, you know?
The thing about it is when you look at even sometimes these players, like I was watching the other night, Dominic Miller, he's Sting's guitarist. He has that kind of classical background, but then obviously putting it into pop and contemporary music, and then you see him playing jazz with it and stuff. These guitar players, they have that phenomenal talent and they can cross over into any genre, within reason. And sometimes like that, when you see them playing traditional or folk, it's great, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really is. And but people like that, they are geniuses, so they can do anything, you know?
Let's talk about, I know it's obvious, I'm living in Spain and I see there with some of your titles, Canción de Amor and El Amor de la Vida and stuff like this. We had recently on the show, we had Eleanor McAvoy, another Eleanor. What was the song she sang again? If I think of the title. Oh yeah, the Spanish word for heart is corazón. This song she sings. When you have traveled around the world like you have and played in different places, sometimes that culture rubs off on you too, doesn't it?
The Spanish thing, El Amor de mi Vida, Ronnie was a fluent Spanish speaker.
Okay, I didn't know that.
He was. And to the point that he knew local dialects.
Okay, wow.
And years ago, he taught English as a foreign language in Spain.
Yes. Okay.
So there's probably you probably meet lots of Spanish people going around saying, "Hell yeah."
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. But that's where that came from. And then Canción de Amor was written by Brendan Graham.
Okay, yeah.
He raised me up for him, and John and I had the album finished, and we got this song. We said Brendan sent it to us. So we had to do it because we loved it so much. So we delayed releasing the album then to record that particular song. But definitely, even when I was with DeDannan doing the gospel work, that was such an enjoyable experience. And that's a whole other kind of part of music that I wouldn't have been open to before that, or I wouldn't have known anything about really.
And tell us about Garradice or Garradice. How do you pronounce that?
Garradice.
Garradice. Tell us about that. So you have...
Garradice is actually a lake in Leitrim.
Okay.
That's why we call the band Garradice. But that came about, I was invited some years ago to spearhead a project called the Leitrim Equation, which was to preserve and search for old Leitrim music, and we found lots of stuff, kind of really old stuff that hadn't been heard in hundreds of years. But there was poet Vincent Woods involved in that, Drina Guckian, dancer, Donna Lunny was with us. But myself, John McCartan, guitar player, Dave Sheridan on flute, whistle, Paul McGovern on pipes. We were part of that Leitrim Equation, and then when it finished, we decided that we'd set up our own band, and we recorded with the advice of Donald Lunny, our first album, Garradice. We're working on the second one now. But another collaboration I'm really enjoying, It's the first album.
It was more like of a local thing, wasn't it, too, that had, further reaches?
Exactly. It was a local thing that just got feet. And in fact, we did a lovely concert in north of Spain just before lockdown. We had a wonderful time. Yeah.
Do you find that, I noticed there when you were talking about DeDannan and going to Finland and Sweden, was there a time there, when you were in your 20s and you were touring around, was there certain countries that you went to more often than others?
Denmark would certainly be one of them. And the Danes seem to have taken me to their hearts big time. So I go to Denmark a couple of times a year now. And they're bringing me out to their festivals. Yeah, I love it. I've so many good friends in Denmark now.
Scandinavian people are different to the Irish people in some ways, but similar in others. But I think at the beginning, it's sometimes I find that they're slower to warm up, but then once they do, they're really nice people.
Absolutely. But one big difference is if they say 4:00, it's 4:00 on the dot. Irish people were like, 4-ish.
Yeah, we have a bit of the Spanish in us, it's like later, mañana.
Yes, absolutely. And I did a few tours of Denmark by train, and that was extraordinary because if you were trying to do a tour of Ireland by train, you could be in trouble with time-wise, and it just wouldn't work with delays and God knows what. But there, it was just clockwork. Yeah.
So let's talk a little about the Canción de Amor, and I know you recorded in Aircourt in Galway, and so was that an album that you went into with kind of an idea of what you wanted to do, or did it change completely? And did you do a lot of kind of pre-planning or pre-production before you actually went to record?
We did a lot of pre-planning and a lot of pre-production because John Feely, I had met him once about 27 years ago when I was touring with DeDannan. I met him in a train station in England. We were on tour and he was on tour, and he came over and introduced himself to us. And I hadn't met him since then until he was doing a concert here in Ballinasloe about 5 years ago. And I went to the concert and we struck up friendship, and a couple of people advised us that, said, why don't you two do something together, So we got together and we spent a long time researching songs, finding songs, and it took a long time to do the album because we did it in Meelick Church. John engineered it in the church, so we did the church. Thankfully, they were so kind to us in the church. The parish priest, he gave us the church with the only people that would be in. The odd time would be a couple of tourists would come into because a very old church. It's the oldest church in use priory in use in Europe, and it's really beautiful.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah.
So we searched for songs.
Yeah, I'm looking actually at your thing. Yeah, it's 1414. Wow. Yeah, it's old. Yeah, it's really old. Was that something that added to the essence of the album, then the church? And yeah.
It did, yeah, because it's very different recording in a church. It's a different energy. And I think in a way the songs, they're not spiritual songs, but they kind of felt more spiritual when we were doing them. It was very spiritual experience doing the whole thing. The songs then, we've rehearsed so many songs, and you know pretty much immediately if a song is not going to work, particularly when it's such a different energy, John's classical guitar playing and my folk and trad.
Yeah, that's something I'm curious because, let's say a lot of Irish playing would be in dadgad or in D tuning and this stuff. And then, but the way, he's an amazing guitar player and he can adapt. But there's probably a point in some songs where you kind of go, oh, can we do that more of this way or do the other? So you have to really work out some things, don't you?
And I would certainly left the guitar playing to him and the decisions on that to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just, again, because I think we're true to ourselves, it gelled,
Yes, yes.
He wasn't trying to be something else, nor was I.
It was a merging of styles, wasn't it?
It was exactly, yeah.
And then when it comes to bringing in, like you had lots of guest musicians on the album and stuff, when you bring in other musicians, do you kind of try and take them from both sides then or more from the traditional side and the folk side?
Both sides. Definitely both sides. There were
Both
musicians I
sides.
would have known and then musicians that John would have worked with. But I suppose it did tend more to be from the classical side because we had contempo string quartet in there and quite a few songs. And because that's the style the album, the direction the album went in. And even when we do our concerts, and I love doing live gigs with John, it does lean a bit more towards his classical guitar playing than it would be folky or traddy. Even the songs are folk and trad, yeah.
When you were recording in the church because of, the surroundings and the acoustics and everything, for some songs, I imagine it's perfect. You're like, oh, it's amazing, the acoustics. But then maybe others, you don't want that on it. So how were you able to isolate it for when you needed it? Like, did you have to use lots of dampeners and, box in rooms? How did you kind of work when you didn't want the big room feel?
No, it was the way John mic'd it. Really, it worked, and we didn't have to
Okay,
box the room in at all. But he had several mics, and it at different
right.
distances from we were on the altar. So they mics he'd come very close to you, and some right way back.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a lot of discovery too, finding out what works where and so on, and experience because he has probably done this a lot before in that style.
Exactly.
But you can see how with some artists they might say we're looking for this kind of reverb hall effect natural sound and we want to go to a cathedral or we want to go to a hall, some kind of a, and you go there. But then on the other songs maybe you don't want that and maybe it's harder to get rid of. So I can imagine when you're doing the whole album in the church, I could envisage that you might have problems with the acoustics being in the way sometimes.
I think, as you said there, you're right to point out, John is so used. He only records in churches most of the time. He does very little studio recording.
Right.
Mainly because the guitar sounds better with that, the classical guitar sounds better with that church sound.
Yes.
But no, and the way he did it, the only song we did do in studio was Canción, amor, because we had been out of church at that stage. So we did that in Ventry Studios up in Knoll.
Okay.
And, very little difference in the sound, really, of the church sound and the Ventry sound. The engineer of Ventry managed to kind of work it so it sounded like the other tracks.
Yeah.
All that engineering is a skill in itself, of course.
Of course, yeah. And for you then, like being a vocalist in the church, I mean, was that something that really gave you more power as well, having those acoustics on hand and being able to express yourself, I imagine was great.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing, singing in a church is just fabulous.
Yeah.
Anyway, and
Yeah, it gives more power, doesn't it, to us?
yeah, and when a church is empty and you have all this beautiful reverb, natural reverb, it's fabulous.
Tell us then about, you would have been more used to recording in studios. So for you, did you have to adapt yourself in any way for that church environment recording?
I was more comfortable actually in the church because sometimes in a studio you feel quite hemmed in or kind of it's more tense.
And you're restricted.
For me,
Yeah.
you're more restricted. It's more tense in a studio, whereas with that church sound, there's something much more natural about it.
Yes.
It's almost like there's no audience there. It's like you are performing for an audience. That's why I have to say I hated lockdown during, when you had to do online gigs during lockdown.
Yes.
So not
Yeah.
natural when there's no audience.
And when you think of the normal kind of studio environment, you can have a vocal booth, and even if it's a big studio and a big vocal booth, you have a certain amount of space. And so even when you're kind of trying to come up with ways of singing, or, saying, let me run through this a few times or whatever, you're walking within that vocal booth. So the great thing about being in an open air space or a church or somewhere, you can kind of say, look, hold on, I need to change that note. I need to come up with something. And you can take a walk down the aisle and sing and hum it and then come back, and you're not restricted at all, are you?
That's 100% right. Yeah, it's certainly, to me, it's much more freeing to record that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But whether I can do it again, well, I say myself and John will do more work together, and if we do,
Well, that's really good. And so, I mean, what's kind of the future holding now? What are the plans? Are you're going to do more work with John, and then are you going to, do more tours and everything? What's in the pipeline?
in the pipeline, at the moment I'm working on an album with Garradice, our second album.
The second album.
So hopefully that'll be out midsummer next year. I want to do my own solo album because it's a long time since I've done one of my. It's about 2014, I think, or 16, since I did a solo album. So
Okay.
I want to do one again. Tour wise, I've a few concerts in Ireland in January, February. Then I have the whole month of March into April in Germany. And then later on, I've a few festivals in Denmark and a tour. Yeah. So.
Oh, nice. That's nice. Yeah. And it's great because I imagine for you during the lockdown, like lots of artists and everything, you were very restricted, and it's hard to know what to do with yourself. Maybe you do more art, you do more things like this. But now that we're out of it, and hopefully for good, there's a new sense of freedom, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And it's just fantastic to see audiences back out again and happy and enjoy themselves. And well, I don't not here, they're not wearing masks, which is great because
Yeah.
that even the mask wearing was stifling for an audience,
Do you find that in some countries when you go now they're wearing masks?
No, no, they're not. No.
No, some audiences,
And,
no. Okay. Yeah, that would be kind of sad too. I mean, you singing your heart out, and it looks like you're singing to a team of immunologists or people with a serious viral illness.
exactly. And then they can't, I love people to sing along. So you can't know if they're singing
Yeah.
along or not, behind these masks.
You can't even see their expression.
Yes, exactly.
You'll be like, is that woman in the front row crying or laughing? I don't know.
Or is that a yawn?
Is that a yawn? Yeah, that's the worst thing, So I think, the thing about it is the whole pandemic, it made us reevaluate things. And I know there's cliches in all of these things we say about the pandemic now, but I think in some ways it made us look at things, pick up new skills, made us look at the skills we have. Do we want to continue them? But I think the main thing, it's kind of like now, whether Christmas coming up and all of these things, when people say, oh, I hate Christmas, but it gives us a chance to recharge the batteries. It gives us a chance to step back and look at things, take a little breather. So there was a long breather during the pandemic, but I think we got to reevaluate, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's a really important thing to reevaluate from time to time. And, we got so lost in all the kind of commercial stuff. And then during the pandemic, you just realize you don't need all this. You don't need to be running all the time. You don't need to be in the car all the time or anything like that. It's just.
No, you can kind of take it easier. So I'm going to let you go in a second, but I know you promised me you'd do a song, so I'm going to hold you to it. So what song are you going to sing for us?
I'm going to do a song by a songwriter I adore. That's Richard Thompson.
Yeah.
And because I'm in Ballinasloe in Galway, I'll do Galway to Graceland.
A lovely song. I love this song.
Yeah, it's one of these songs that I really, really wish I'd written. When he describes her flight,
yeah,
silver wings carried her over the sea.
Yeah, it's beautiful lyrics, beautiful. Off you go.
Okay, I'll give it a go, Simon. Oh, she dressed in the dark, and she whispered amen. She was pretty and pink, like a young girl again. 20 years married, and she never thought twice. She sneaked out the door and walked into the night, and silver wings carried her over the sea, from the west coast of Ireland to West Tennessee, to be with her sweetheart Oh, she left everything from Galway to Graceland to be with the king. She was humming Suspicion. It's the song she liked best. She had Elvis, I love you tattooed on her breast. When they landed in Memphis, while her heart beat so fast, she had dreamed for so long, now she'd see him at last. She was down by his graveside day after day. Come close and tight, they would pull her away to be with her sweetheart. Oh, she left everything from Galway to Graceland to be with the king. They came in their thousands from the whole human race to pay the respects at his last resting place. But blindly she knelt there, and she told him her dream. And she thought that he answered, or that's how it seemed. Then they dragged her away, it was handcuffs this time. She said, my good man, are you out of your mind? Don't you know that we're married? See, I'm wearing his ring. I come from Galway to Graceland to be with the king. I come from Galway to Graceland to be with the king.
Really nice, Eleanor. You carried that song so well. It's such a fabulous song.
Thank you, Simon.
But you've such a fabulous voice. It really carries it so good. And very nice guitar playing too, I have to say. So good job.
Oh.
So listen, Eleanor, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. If you want to plug any shows or anything that you've coming up, feel free to tell the audience and we'll spread the word, you know.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Simon. You'll find shows on www.eleanorshanley.ie. We're doing some with Garradice, some with Mike Hanran, the great Mike Hanran from Stockton's Wing, and John Feely, and then my own little band are coming to Germany with me. So
brilliant.
I'm looking forward to meeting people along the way. I love being back on the road again, and I love doing interviews like this with yourself, Simon.
Thank you for taking the time and for singing us a song. So not everybody sings, so it's nice when people show us their vocal talents like you know?
Thanks a million.
Thank you. Eleanor Shanley, everybody. Okay, thank you very much, Eleanor Shanley. It was a pleasure to talk to you and hear about your career and all the many people you've sung with and all the people you've performed over the years. Amazing. And such a great voice and some amazing songs. So we wish you the best of luck with the future. Look forward to hearing more great songs from you. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And thank you, the listeners, for listening to our podcast and making it more successful. So we're so delighted that people are passing on the message about the podcast, and we hope you're enjoying the guests. And until the next time, look after your friends, look after your family, take care of the people you love. My name is Simon Kay. This is the Collective Whisper podcast. Bye-bye.